Apologies for my voice. I am under the weather. Well, here's some news that at one time would have been really cool to hear. It would have been really exciting. Not so much these days. But, well, here we go with deadline Blake 7 Reboot. In the works from The Last of Us director Peter Hoare, I guess, and A Good Girl's Guide to Murder exec Matthew Booch, I don't know. Anyway, Emmy-nominated The Last of Us director Peter Hoare has launched a production outfit and is working on a reboot of cult British sci-fi classic Blake 7. Hoare has opened genre-based indie Multitude Productions with A Good Girl's Guide to Murder executive Matthew Booch and West End producer Jason Haillery. Yeah, I'm going to suck at names. The trio has snapped up a wealth of IP, including Blake 7, which last aired on the BBC 45 years ago. Hoare, who directed the critically acclaimed Long Time episode of HBO's The Last of Us, plans to direct the Blake 7 reboot, which will go out to buyers soon. Booch would love it to go to the BBC and will likely seek co-pro funding from the American streamers and European players like RTL. Created by Terry Nation, the man credited with inventing the Daleks, Blake 7 aired for 4 seasons on the BBC from 1978 to 1981. The show, which exhibited numerous tropes of the traditional space opera, followed the exploits of a political dissident, Rog Blake, played by Gareth Thomas, who leads a small group of rebels against the forces of the totalitarian Terran Federation that rules the Earth and many colonized planets. There have been several reboot attempts down the decades, but none have caught fire. Multitude struck the deal with Nation's Estate, and casting and writing conversations will commence in due course. With genre shows like Doctor Who stuck in something of a rut, and less money around in high-end scripted horror Hoare and Booch believe that now is the time to set up shop. Okay. They have been joined at Multitude by executive producer Lizzie Worsdell, whose credits include Amarita Arcaria's indie pick The Carer. The Blake 7 story is legendary because they were given the British police show Softly Softly slot that was intended for police drama with a budget intended for one big set and a few location shots, said double BAFTA winner Hoare, whose credits include It's a Sin and Umbrella Academy. Umbrella Academy had a couple of good episodes. I didn't finish that one. I'll have to catch up later. But anyway, yeah, it had a few good ones. Anyway, at the time, it felt like it meant something. Those shows got into my veins. I could tell they didn't have money, but I was able to compartmentalize and enjoy the ride knowing that the sets wobbled. Well, that's because of strong concept, story, character development, and charm. You got to have charm. You can get all the money you want. You're not going to in this current era because of all the crap that's gone and burned the money. But nevertheless, even if you do, doesn't mean the show's going to work. Hoare compares Blake 7 to DP's hit Andor. It's not a bad comparison. It's actually pretty good. The same thought came to me when I was watching Andor. I said, this is more like a Blake 7 show than a Star Wars show. You know? Other people compared it to Blade Runner, and yeah, there's some of that. But really, Blake 7, a new Blake 7, would probably look a lot like that in tone and, aesthetic and everything. But, anyway, what she thinks is a success, not because of its circa $25 million per budget $25 million per hour budget, but because of the integrity, wit, and sophistication. He said Doctor Who, which DP has just exited after only 2 seasons of one of the biggest co-pro deals of the decade, is a cautionary tale. I don't think anybody would doubt the skills at the front line of that show. I would. I mean, I do. I mean, how do you do this? How do you take someone else's money like that and treat it like toilet paper? I mean, look, I'll give it to RTD. He gave everyone fair warning with that crap he did with Devros. That told you what it was all about. No concept, no stories, no adventure, none of that. He was just going to preach his sermons. And then he barely does that. Really, it was a lazy, just crap. But Hoare continues, but something went wrong. Yeah. Gee, I don't know. Gee, I wonder what it could be. Anyway, I think there were lots of areas you could point fingers at. Well, yeah, one in particular. But ultimately, it wasn't a better show with more money. No. I mean, Doctor Who is, they're almost notorious for not having any money in its, original years and stuff. And, people complain about the sets and stuff. No one cared at the time. Some shows were better than others. But as long as it had the charm and the concept and the story, and you get immersed in it, it really doesn't matter. You guys can't seem to do that anymore. So it wasn't a better show with more money, and that's a good thing. Well, it's not good that, maybe you should have, of course, he probably would have been fired or sacked, as they call it. He said, this is kind of a stupid idea. Oh, yeah? Well, you know where the door is, because and that's a good thing. It's not a good thing, because we haven't got the money anymore. Nobody has. Yeah, so now you're going to have to try really hard and work, huh? Maybe, I guess, is that the point you're making, a roundabout way here? Because, yeah, that's true. But to just dance around that and say, I don't think anybody would doubt the skills of the front line of that. Oh, come on, man. This, according to Booch, will be Multitude Productions' raison d'etre. I never can. I'm sorry. I'm an idiot on this. Booch said, we're driven by our passions, but also seeing that there is a gap in the market in the UK, particularly with the well-publicized dropping off of Doctor Who for genre-based British IP. Yeah, that's going to cast a long shadow over all this. Yeah, it's going to be tough looking for investment. We look back at when we were young with a degree of nostalgia, but also thinking about the 70s and 80s as we were growing up and the amount of genre material that was available. Whether it was Blake 7 or the Narnia adaptation, we are looking at the international market and seeing if there is a way of dovetailing that British low-budget sensibility with international markets. We know in the U.S. there's a big contraction, and we will need to think about finding ways to make things more economical. Yeah, it really, see, if Doctor Who was still on fire, and by on fire, I mean, was the hit thing it was 10 years ago, that kind of thing. It was driving merchandise sales and stuff, and then you say, well, you know what, we got this other property that's pretty good, and one of the guy who created the dialects, he created this. Oh, really? And I kind of thought they would have gotten it off the ground sooner. There was, the article says, there was talks quite a bit about a Blake 7 reboot, what have you. And, it just didn't happen. And, of course, even back at the time the show was on, you could easily see where you could cross over the shows. And something like that. I don't know. But nevertheless, you would think it could have happened. But now, You know, you want it to look like Andor? I don't think so. I mean, you're gonna have, that's gonna be a tough sell. And it's kind of a small. I love the show. I love Blake Seven. You know, it's an interesting thing because, you know, they were running it on PBS along with Doctor Who, and I was heavily into Doctor Who at the time. And then they said, "Hey, there's this other show," and you know, it's done at the same time, so it had a lot of the stylings of a Doctor Who show and stuff. But it was very, very different from Doctor Who and very, very dark. You know, by comparison. And I was like, wow, this is interesting, you know. And it's got its own identity to it. You know, I say, well, it's space opera. Sure, but it found its own place. It's not a rip-off of Star Trek or Star Wars and all that, not to that extent. And it was a good show. They had a lot of fascinating elements to it, interesting takes on the guy who's supposed to be the hero, maybe he isn't so much, so on. As the guy who's purely a creep ends up becoming the hero of the day. And then the very, very sinister, dark ending of the show. Now, the show, had it been picked up for our 5th season, it would have continued on. But, yeah, but the way they end it and everything, it's just fascinating to watch, you know, in my opinion. That being said, it doesn't have nearly the following that Doctor Who did. That could change, I suppose, if someone really knocks it out of the park on this, but I mean, just look around. You know, what the odds of this happening? Highly unlikely. I mean, at least this guy is sort of admitting, yeah, you see, that's the thing. The idea that everyone's stuck in the bubble, it's not always the case. You know, he's got to be careful how I say this, but, you know, he knows, oh, God, man, we're really screwing this up. You're really screwing up this. This isn't going to work. And, of course, it didn't. It's absolutely humiliating and embarrassing. Following the Jodie era, Russell T Davies, the big savior, comes in, and that's what he does. Yeah. So, I'll continue with the article. With this in mind, Multitude is working on a TV series version of Luke Reinhardt's The Search for the Dice Man, the sequel to the cult classic Dice Man. Well, it makes sense, you know. I guess they got to look for him, now he's missing. Novel for which Paramount owns the rights. An A-list star is attached, Booch said, with Danny Wallace, Yes Man, aboard to write, and Tim Kirkby, Fleabag, directing. The indie has also optioned Patrick Carman's Skeleton Creek book series, which is being adapted by Philip Morgan and was described by Horror as a British Stranger Things crossed with Skins. Okay. The team is also working on an adaptation of a well-known video game and sci-fi series, the latter in development with UK broadcaster ITV. Although no more details were disclosed on those, Horror and Booch are keen to find new sources of funding and are developing a version of Rakako Akiyoshi's The Dark Maiden's Japanese novel, which is seeking external funders, along with a crime series, Scammers, made with fraudster-turned-content maker Tony Sales and his Underworld TV outfit. Horror and Booch, who have worked with Britain's biggest showrunners, including Russell T Davies and Jack Thorne, are championing a multi-writer model to get scribes back to work. We've never really had a showrunner model in the UK, and I think it is full of problems because it doesn't necessarily speak to that collaborative nature, added Booch. Oh, really? Russell T Davies is Russell, but I think these people are relatively few and far between. I mean, his most recent experience is working under Russell T Davies as a showrunner. Anyway, taking this collaborative approach, Booch is confident that Multitude's model is the right one to create success in a tricky market that has seen lots of traditional drama companies shut up shop. Yeah, because they were all bad, and they burned their properties to the ground. We're very aware that it feels counterintuitive to launch something at this point, but equally we feel there is a gap in the market in terms of what we are doing. He added, our expertise straddles both international and British lower budget material. Obviously the proof will be in the pudding. Well, yeah, so they've got the option. Will they actually be able to get it off the ground? Probably not. I mean, he's citing Andor. You're not getting Andor money. That being said, someone clever can figure things out. A lot of times, and this, the history of filmmaking, whatnot goes, wow, it looks spectacular, and you realize it was really cheap crap, but the guy was just really good at shooting things and getting it done that way. So, and the newer technologies makes it cheaper to achieve great visuals, but the main thing is in the performance and the concept, and if you can capture that, and a lot of that Orwellian dystopian future of Blake 7, and then the ragtag heroes that come together to rebel against that, you can achieve that. Of course, eventually, if the money comes in, you can get to your spectacular fights and whatnot that would happen in these sort of things. Of course, you're going to have to repurpose props, repurpose footage of the ships flying around, stuff like that. There's ways to do it. But first of all, finding funding for it. Unless there's just some billionaire Blake 7 fanboy out there and I just gotta see more Blake 7, then maybe that could come through for it. But ultimately, due to how so many franchises, what have you, have been treated, Doctor Who and Star Trek and Star Wars, is so badly done. I'm for them leaving Blake 7 alone. And it's too bad, because there's a lot of material you can work with there. There's other shows with similar themes, of course, the Andor one. Not quite, but some of that with Expanse and this type of thing. But the woke era burnt a lot of money. And so it's really going to be tough for them to pull this off. As far as the other productions, I'm sure they'll get some of these done. And they got to get up and running and rolling, so some of the more cheaper ones they can do can at least make them some money before they pursue something like this, which out of the batch here they've mentioned, Blake 7 is the only one I know about. So if this is the main IP that they can shop around and say there's interest in, but how many are going to be believing in that scenario after what's happened? So I wish it could be good. I mean, the odds that it could be. I mean, some of this of him not, I'm like, it sounds a little gutless in the way he's saying it, but not saying it about what went wrong with Doctor Who and all that. So you may be behind the scenes and it's his own company. It says, yeah, we know that was stupid. Let's not do that. But then again, he says, I really hope we can partner with the BBC. Well, no, that almost instantly means it's probably would kill the show. You're better off finding, I don't know, one of the streamers, I guess. And even there's pitfalls there to worry about. So, I mean, they got it. If they can get the investor, then there'll be a new Blake 7. But count me as dubious as that it'll be successful or take off. And it's gonna, even if it's good, it's gonna be tough. But I don't know. Good luck.